It's showtime for Aaron Jones. Welcome back to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I am your host, John Delray. Yes, it's true. Aaron Jones is coming back to the Green Bay Packers for his 7th year. This all coming out this morning. Not gonna lie, I had a different video idea for today, and then this news broke this morning, and here we are. So I'm electing to give you all the details that we know at this time about Aaron Jones deciding to come back to the Green Bay Packers. And yes, I say deciding to come back because by all accounts, it sounds as though he had a choice, and you'll see why as I dive into the contract details. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the Black History Month panel that I went to at Lambeau Field last night. They brought in Dave Robinson, they brought in Marv Fleming, Larry McCarren emceed. It was a great experience to dive into the history of the Green Bay Packers, to honor Vince Lombardi and the ideals that he stood for. I'm going to talk about that towards the end of the episode. But first, if you haven't hit yet, like, share, subscribe. We're getting so close to 400 subscribers. I do appreciate each and every one of you who are here, who check out the videos every single time that I put them out 3 or 4 times a week. It has been a lot of fun. And yes, those of you who are frequently commenting as of late, I see you. I've got some responses coming. In fact, I'm kind of building up to, I don't want to do it too soon, but very, very soon we're going to do a mailbag type episode where people can just submit questions, and the entire episode is me just answering listener questions. So certainly if that's something of interest to you, you can start putting comments in the comments now. Start putting questions in the comments. There, that works better. Start doing that now, and I will start compiling. I won't answer many of those as I'm compiling a mailbag, and that's kind of what I've been doing lately. So getting to that direction in the not so distant future. Also soon you can expect to see some Hall of Fame features on whether players deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, either the Packer Hall of Fame or not, charting ahead the future forward, even looking at some of the teams in the division, as I know that's been requested. I just kind of want some more info to be out there about free agents, stuff like that, before we totally dive into that. But if you are a listener from another team in the division, yes, that info is coming. I'm going to be devoting a week to that soon. So let's get to the topic of the day. Aaron Jones, showtime, number 33 himself, electing to come back to the Green Bay Packers. And I say that because it's not just as simple as the Packers restructured his contract. We know from past episodes, from all the things that tell us this, that a restructure does not always have to be agreed to by the player. That a restructure is just sheerly a team moving some money around, pushing it ahead to future years, allocating different things rather than roster bonuses. Now they're signing bonuses, adding void years. Players don't always have to agree to all of those conditions, and yet a team can still bring down their cap number because it doesn't affect how the player actually gets paid. Well, in the case of Aaron Jones, it's kind of a combination. Not only did they restructure his contract, but he himself elected to take a $5 million pay cut to stay with the Green Bay Packers. Yes, I mean, here's the nitty-gritty on what they did. He took that $5 million pay cut, but then they also took $8.52 million of salary and roster bonuses and converted it to a signing bonus. Now, the reason why they did that is because money allocated into signing bonuses can be spread out over the life of a contract. Salary cannot be. So what a lot of teams in the modern NFL do is they try to push as much money into signing bonuses as they can, less into salary. But here's the flip side. Signing bonuses are fully guaranteed. You can't take that back. Whereas a salary, if you replace a player or if you release him, suddenly is opened up. So what the Green Bay Packers did was they took this chunk of change, $8.52 million, and they pushed it instead into a signing bonus. Then they added a void year onto the back end of his contract. This is a fictional year that's there purely for monetary purposes, so that they could spread out that signing bonus over a whole nother year. They did that with $8.52 million. Pair that with Aaron Jones himself taking a $5 million cut this year, and suddenly, you have a 29-year-old running back who, heading into next season, had a $20 million cap number. Now, it's $8 million. So, the Green Bay Packers, for $20 million over the cap, essentially just saved $12 million by Jones agreeing to this cut and the Packers issuing a restructure of what was left of the contract. The exact numbers, 11.816 is estimated to be the exact number in cap savings for the Green Bay Packers. Now, coming off of the contract that was, Aaron Jones was due this coming year to make $20 million in cap number. If they were to release him, it would have been a $10 million savings. If they would have released him after June 1st, it would have been a $16 million savings. Instead, they basically get $12 million in savings and get to keep him around. The downside? It does push some money forward, although not as much because Jones took that $5 million pay cut. His 2024 number, it's still kind of being sorted out. A lot of the insiders are discussing. Of course, these things haven't been released by the NFL yet, at least as of this time of filming yet either, because they all have to get approved and all that jazz. But basically, in 2024... I don't know. I don't know if Aaron Jones is going to be remaining a Packer. This may be one last year. I'm still hopeful. We were saying the same thing last year. The last year could have been the last year because of the cap number. So never say never. But going into 2024, Aaron Jones is going to be a 30-year-old running back with a cap number of $24 million, of which $12 million can be freed if he's released before the final year of that contract. Still could be an extension in the future. Still could be other restructures, pay cuts, whatever. But here's what we know. 2024 looks pretty untenable, even more so now. But 2023, $5 million pay cut for Aaron Jones. Restructuring on the Packers' end, they now have freed up $12 million of cap space and brought his number all the way down to approximately $8 million. So here's the thing. Let's address a few topics right off the bat with this Aaron Jones news. One, yes, they've reduced $12 million. The Packers are still, per most estimates from Sport Track Over the Cap, etc., they're still $8 million over the cap as it stands right now. And of course, you can't be over the cap when the new league year starts, so they still have to find some money. Keep in mind, too, that their draft is going to cost them something like $10 million. Any new free agents, retaining Josh Nijman, is going to be $4 million, believed to be. Re-signing any of the guys that aren't on the cap. So yes, while they are $8 million over the cap right now, they need substantially more room than $8 million to actually operate this offseason. Keep in mind, too, trading Aaron Rodgers tacks another $9 million onto the cap right now. So depending on where you are with that, you can think of them as $8 million over the cap, or for all intents and purposes, they're really $17 million over the cap right now once a final decision is made. Of which, a lot of people think it already has been. But here's the truth. Right now, they are $8 million over the cap. So let's look at a couple ways that the Green Bay Packers could still make moves to at least vanquish that $8 million and get to the cap level right now. Well, one, left tackle David Bakhtiari. Looking over the entire roster of the Packers, looking at it up and down, you have to say, all right, who is someone that the Packers could approach about a pay cut? They've already got Aaron Jones done. Is there anyone else that would take a cut? One of the only candidates really on the roster is that of 32-year-old left tackle David Bakhtiari. Now, I don't know how likely that is. I'm not sure, given his temperament, the fact that he did play at his contract's level this season when he was able to play. I'm just not sure that he and his agency will look at that and say, yep, that was a pay cut worthy scenario. Aaron Jones maybe had a couple reasons why he could justify it, and I'll get to those in a minute. I'm not sure David Bakhtiari, with the way left tackles are being paid, has the same justification that he can sit back and say, I should willingly take less. Because if that knee is structurally sound, he's probably walking out of the free agent market and getting the exact same deal. So why would he take less? So, okay, let's say pay cut is out. No one else on the roster is going to take a pay cut. Okay? Let's just assume that at this point. So then what can they do? Well, if they release David Bakhtiari, it frees up $5.7 million. To me, that's insane. Why would you do that? He's on the cap for about $23 million. 5.7 is your savings for an all-world left tackle who, yes, you have some health concerns about, but he still is an all-world left tackle. You're probably going to have to spend that $5.7 million somewhere else just plugging the hole you create on your roster by getting rid of him. So it's not worth it to that, but you can restructure Bakhtiari. Again, restructure, pushing money into the future. You can restructure him. The max restructure on David Bakhtiari just happens to be about $12 million. So there you go. You're at the cap level if you just do a max restructure of David Bakhtiari, if that's the way it goes. Other potential opportunities. Kenny Clark, if you were to do a max restructure of his contract, opens up about $11 million. Jay Alexander, same deal, $9 million. Or, of course, you could extend Rashawn Gary, and you could open up about, approximately, depending on how they did it, you could open up to $8 million in extending Rashawn Gary. And I think a Rashawn Gary extension this summer is a no-brainer. I think it's going to happen. Some people will point to his lack of sack production, but honestly, Rashawn Gary is one of the most productive edge rushers in the NFL. You already have some depth concerns there. Whether he plays the first 4, 6, 8 games next year or not, take the long-term view, he's going to be getting an extension in Green Bay. And if they do it now, they can open up to about $8 million in cap by doing so. So there you go. Packers, $12 million over the cap Packers approximately $8 million over the cap right now. So you've got Bakhtiari, Kenny Clark, Jay Alexander, Rashawn Gary. Those are probably the biggest options you have to close that gap to get to the cap level right now. So that's the financials from the Packers side. But let's talk about why Aaron Jones may have agreed to this $5 million pay cut and restructure. Truth is, he wants to stay in Green Bay. That's probably a big part. He's been very vocal about that. A few years ago when he signed this new contract in Green Bay when he was a free agent and re-signed, it was all about coming back and finishing off something in Green Bay. He loves Green Bay. He loves being a part of the team. He loves everything Green Bay stands for. So let's not act like that's not part of it. But at the same time, if Aaron Jones is a 29-year-old running back, despite him being one of the more talented runners in the NFL, may not get the same contract on the open market right now. The NFL does have a number of marquee running backs who are free agents this year, including Saquon Barkley, amongst others. Bigger names than Jones, even if Jones's production on a per-snap basis is significantly better than a number of these running backs, it may not matter. Jones is also 29. So the likelihood that he's going to walk into a contract of 10 to 12 million on the open market is at least a question. Whether it should be or not is a different discussion, but in reality, whether it could happen is a question. So, he takes the pay cut, they restructure. He gets to stay where he wants. Whether it's Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, whatever, doesn't matter. He gets to stay in Green Bay where he believes in the cause. By the way, if you haven't seen it yet, there is a video going around the internet, especially on Twitter, put out by the NFL, of Aaron Jones being surprised by some family members with his Walter Payton nomination announcement. Really, really, really beautiful video. Really shows you the man that Aaron Jones is, that I've talked about before, that that is a man who carries the G and embodies the Packer way. And whether you think this much money to a running back is smart or not, Aaron Jones is staying a Green Bay Packer for at least one more year, and I am amongst the crowd that is over the moon happy about that. A couple other questions do arise out of this discussion, though. The one that I've seen asked very prevalently thus far is, what does this mean for the quarterback situation? They only bring back Aaron Jones if it means Aaron Rodgers is coming back, right? Otherwise, why would they spend this much on a running back? If Aaron Rodgers isn't the quarterback, it must mean that they're going all in again, and it must mean that Aaron Rodgers is coming back, right? No, I don't think this has anything to do with the quarterback position at all. Because if it's Aaron Rodgers, yeah, you want your best running back back. If it's Jordan Love, you want him surrounded by capable playmakers so you can see what he is actually capable of. Aaron Jones fits either way. I don't think this has anything to do with whoever is playing quarterback, regardless. So that answers that one. Number 2, are the Green Bay Packers still going to draft a running back? Because when there was a big question, I mean, there were some early round mocks of running backs to the Packers, and I'm not talking first round, but still second, third round, that, hey, Aaron Jones is on his way out the door. He could get cut because of that cap. We had the completely, unbelievably asinine reporting from a writer in Chicago who said that Aaron Jones is going to get cut without knowing anything about Green Bay at all. I'll get into that a different time. But there were questions as to whether Aaron Jones would be back or not. So people were thinking that the Green Bay Packers could pick a running back early. They will still pick a running back. I feel very confident about that. However, I think it's probably going to be the best value that they can get on day 3. Matt LaFleur, when he first came on board, talked about the importance of having 3 capable running backs. We see in his system, even this year, how important a Patrick Taylor was at times. So I think the Green Bay Packers are still going to invest. Now, whether that's to be Aaron Jones's backup, like whether it's his heir, I guess you could say, or whether it's just a necessary component of the roster, that stands to be seen in the future. However, I think you can bank on the fact that at least one day 2 or 3 pick is going to be a running back for the Green Bay Packers to continue to fortify this position well into the future. Something to keep in mind. Also, keep in mind A.J. Dillon's contract is coming up soon as well. So, going to have to get addressed eventually. Moving on from that. That is all the news about Aaron Jones. I just want to spend a couple minutes just addressing something that I attended at Lambeau Field last night. This was a Black History Month panel discussion. I went to Lambeau Field. You could get tickets through the Packer Hall of Fame. I'm not sure if they live streamed this event or not, but it was hosted by Larry McCarren. He was the MC. And then they flew them in, Dave Robinson and Marv Fleming. Yes, 2 legends of the Lombardi era. Marv Fleming, a 5-time Super Bowl champion, Dave Robinson, NFL Hall of Famer. And they talked about what it was like to be drafted by the Green Bay Packers in 1963, on the cusp of the Civil Rights Movement. What was it like being a Packer in Green Bay at a time when segregation was still in a lot of places, at a time when restaurants were not catering to both races or weren't utilizing inclusive practices? What was it like to find living pre the Civil Rights Movement? And it was a very, very worthwhile experience. Both men spoke with a great level of wisdom, respect, reverence, including about the city of Green Bay. And there were a number of stories that were told at this event that are never going to be written in a book, that are never going to be passed down forever, but things that are worth knowing to gain a true appreciation for Packers fans of what was a time not only for Green Bay but for our country, and a time of great success for the Green Bay Packers led by Vince Lombardi as well. You know, one of them, and I just want to share a couple of them as a quick overview. Dave Robinson was asked about being in spring practice and knowing whether he was a first-round pick. He knew he was making the roster, right? But before that, in college, he was asked about whether he knew he would make a team or not. And he said that he was pretty confident he had a heck of a spring practice. And basically what he said is, I knew I was making the team because 19 days straight I came home from practice with blood on my jersey. Never once that blood was mine. I thought that was a pretty good sign I was making the team. That's a fantastic quote. Beyond that, there was also bickering between Dave Robinson and Marv Fleming because they were in the same draft class in 1963. Robinson, the first-round pick for Green Bay. Fleming, the 11th-round pick. There was bickering about what their starting salaries were. There was talk of how Marv Fleming was drafted at the very young age of 20, and in Green Bay at the time, there were some 18 and over clubs that you could attend, but then also some clubs for older folks as well, and Marv Fleming, being 20, would go to the 18 and over clubs. And Vince Lombardi started getting talked to about, hey, you got this young tight end. He's in there teaching all these girls how to do dances from Los Angeles as he's in these 18-year-old clubs. And so Vince Lombardi hears and he calls in Marv, gets Marv Fleming into the office. And he yells, what are you doing in these clubs for 18-year-olds? And why aren't you in the other? And Marv goes, Coach, I'm 20. I can't go to the other clubs. And Vince just goes, well, I'd stay home. And then beyond that, there were even stories about how in the 60s, as African-American individuals, they couldn't get their haircut in Green Bay. So whenever the schedule would come out every year, they would sit down and discuss, all right, where are cities with more African-Americans that there are barbers that can take care of our hair. And it wasn't an issue of necessarily a prejudice. It was that Green Bay barbers at the time didn't know how to cut black hair. So they had to find that on the map. They also told stories about how after Herb Adderley moved on from the Green Bay Packers, it went down to the Dallas Cowboys where he finished out his career. He came back and told them stories about how in Dallas, African-American players weren't allowed to live within 20 miles of the practice field. It was a different time. And yet with Vince Lombardi, he made sure that Green Bay players dealt with as much or as little of that as physically possible. Because the one thing that they all agreed on that panel was that Vince Lombardi fought against it hard. And I don't think this is something talked about enough. Everyone talks about the championships. Everyone talks about the winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. But the truth is, for Vince Lombardi, he fought for his players, and he fought for equality. They shared one story about how Vince Lombardi was told, never choose an African-American before round 3. Why? Because they deal with inferior equipment, they may not be as smart, and they may not be as well coached. And then there he was in 63 choosing Dave Robinson in the first round. He didn't care what others had to say. He wanted good men, and he wanted great football players. And it's who he picked, and it's who he got. And he fought for them. He fought for them equally. Vince Lombardi, the story was told last night as well, that Vince Lombardi there was an incident and amongst the team where there was some bouts of racism. You couldn't escape it. Everyone was coming in from different backgrounds. And there were some things said at times, and there was one particular time at St. Norbert's as they were getting ready for the season, Marv Fleming told this story, that someone said something very racially driven. And the next day, Vince Lombardi gathered up the whole team and he said, look, the Green Bay Packers are made up of 3 colors. Players are sitting there going, okay, black, white, green, gold, what the hell's 3? And then Vince Lombardi goes, green, gold, and Italians. It's important to note the impact that Vince Lombardi has had in Green Bay beyond winning. And it's important to note what the history was for these players, what the history was for these men. Marv Fleming was the very first African-American player to play offense for the Green Bay Packers. It's important to hear their stories. And I guess that leads me into the last thing. Look, I was incredibly surprised by one thing last night and not disappointed. But the truth is, the thing that I was surprised by was Mark Murphy. And I know I've talked about him on this channel before, but look, I walked in last night at Lambeau and Mark Murphy was sitting there. He was talking with everyone. He was at the event. And I thought, the friend that I was there with, I said, yeah, he may be jumping out of here pretty quick. Like, he may be just here to say hi to Dave Robinson and Marv Fleming and then get to getting, right? I mean, he's the president, busy dude. He's been there all day. He's there all day, every day. But he sat there and he listened. He was there for the entire presentation. When it got to the end of the panel, in fact, Dave Robinson made a joke because they were talking about their starting salaries and what they were in the 60s, and Dave Robinson looked over at Mark Murphy and said, "Because of Mark there, everyone's getting paid way more money now." He was there the whole time. And these men came before him too. Not as far before as someone like me, but they came well before him. And Mark Murphy sat there and he listened to their stories, listened to the history of the Green Bay Packers, who Mark Murphy's most important job is being a steward for the franchise. And that includes the financial picture, it includes the product on the field, but it also includes the pillars, the standards that had been reestablished under Vince Lombardi. You can bicker all you want about whether Mark Murphy has handled every single situation correctly. You can bicker all you want about whether he should be overseeing Brian Gutekunst. The one thing that I will not take any bickering about is whether Mark Murphy stands for the Packer way. If you live anywhere near Green Bay and you have the opportunity to become a Hall of Fame member, or you have the opportunity to attend these events when they are put on, please do so. Because the one thing that I will say was slightly disappointing was the fact that that room was not sold out. There were open seats. It was the fact that I was one of the youngest people in the room. People need to hear these stories for a lot of different reasons. But even just so much as if you're a Packer fan, to honor those who came before us to play this game and build it to what it is. People need to hear these stories. So if you haven't yet, I encourage you to start. That's it for today's episode of Lombardi Time Brews. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. I'll be back on Monday talking more stuff. We'll see if there's more news that breaks. We'll see if I'm going to do a Hall of Fame feature. We'll get there, and I will put out something on Monday. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. Thanks for joining me here on Lombardi Time Brews, and as always, go Pack Go.